Wait, I think so. I'm sorry. I think I hit the stop recording button instead of stop sharing.
Oh.
Oh, does it?
So, uh, okay.
Oh,
So
that's all right. I can, let me, let's see, one
I think
participant.
I'm still the host because I still have that pause the recording button.
Okay, let me
Okay, it's
go.
recording now. I think it's recording now. It is recording now.
Okay,
So, okay.
Yep, it is.
let me, let's see, I'm trying to give it to Kevin. Here we go.
Awesome.
Kevin, make co-host. There you go.
Awesome.
All right.
Great. That was really good about that CVE. It's funny because the company I work for, we use WebEx, so that makes me really wonder when they're going to talk about the disclosing that. But maybe they fixed it right in the patch. That's what we hope for. So there we go. Oh, interesting. Got to give permissions again. Give me just a minute. I'm gonna have to quit and reopen, unfortunately.
That's fine. Go for it. And then,
Right back.
yeah.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay. Are you still co-host? You should be.
I think it might have you. You might have to delegate again because I
Okay. Let me actually do it. Let me, what are you at? There you are. There you go. Make a host. Boom.
sweet. There we go. Awesome. Cool. All right. Everybody can see my screen, I'm hoping.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for taking the time to spend with Pacific Hackers. We enjoy, talking about security. We're so security minded that that's what kind of, organization we are. But a little bit about my talk today is going to be called obviously security SOC as a service. But I did want to introduce myself and kind of go through and talk about. Let me get that out of the way. A little bit introduce myself so that everybody knows who I am, and kind of that can be one of the things I like to introduce to the community. But I've been part of this organization for a couple of years. Me and Rod actually met during RSA a couple of years ago. And that being said, I've been in the IT, industry for probably pretty much over a decade, and wore many different hats, and kind of worked in the private and public sector. And the good thing about it is, I think with IT, you are integral to the organization because you get to, not only interact with various, departments, from HR all the way, to facilities, all the way back up to the CEO, the stakeholders, right? You basically touch every part of the organization. So, without a doubt, we're involved in security, is one of our, things that come. I think it comes with the role, but it's not, you're not in a SOC, right? But you definitely have to be aware in security and have a security mindset, in my opinion, to be successful, as someone that's working in the help desk or desktop support roles. But that being said, I did start out early in my career, luckily, working as a contractor. And, I did get a chance to work with many different organizations until, I started realizing that, all these companies, they all have, different types of, methods for their SOC or their NOC. you know, and some of them are basically on site and you can walk into a room and there's an actual department, and but then a lot of them are outsourced. And you know, I'd say in the last 5 years, I've started noticing that. And it started to dawn on me that, you know, we're reaching a point now with the Internet of Things and all these different types of, you know, companies that are small, medium-sized businesses, and you know, the big players, obviously the Fortune 500s. There's 24/7 security operations centers that are, you know, happening, you know, to monitor all these various you know, organizations. And how do they do it successfully? How do you monitor 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 organizations? And or do they have an in-house security team? You know, and so that kind of, you know, is where this talk is going to come into play. But, you know, being said, I kind of wanted to just introduce myself. You know, I do organize a lot of the presenters for the, you know, Pacific Hackers, as well as I've attended the conferences in the past. And Marco and Rod are, you know, amazing people. And just to say, this is a great organization for people to learn about how to get into cybersecurity, and kind of, you know, if they're interested in learning. And we provide this for free, you know, and that's something I want to say, that's been one of the things that has kept me and being involved, is that I feel like giving back and being part of like the community that's doing that, to try to, you know, get people some sort of like a you know, a beginning, a starting point to look into cybersecurity roles. So that's mainly what I want to say about myself. Also, you know, I do obviously, you know, work in now in InfoSec, and I did kind of start in IT, and then I kind of pivoted. And like wearing many different hats, I think is great, you know, because then, you know, in an organization, because then without a doubt, you just get to see a lot of different things. And being out here in the Bay Area has just been a great experience for me and overall my career. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start with the security, you know, SOC as a service. But I really want to talk about it because I think the future is really going to come down to organizations are looking at it. The market's shifting, right? There's a lot of things happening with companies, and they're outsourcing a lot of their infrastructure. And some of the things that, you know, I started doing this research on this topic, and it was dawning on me. I was like, there's a lot of companies out there that are already doing this, but we don't really think about it as SOC as a service, or providing, you know, a service where you protect their, you know, infrastructure 24/7. What are the models like? So I started looking at the subscriptions and some of the offerings, and you'd be surprised that a lot of the companies are, you know, already kind of exploring this, because they've also thought about it too. Like there's, you know, with the remote workforce and kind of with the situation we're in with COVID, obviously people are, you know, scattered across the globe, right? But they're working in these companies, but at the end of the day, you still have to have a SOC, right? You still have to have IT, you still have to have different things to protect your environment. So with that being said, you know, it's a big thing for me to get into the build on this principle of, it's, you know, what is a SOC? You know, let's start with that. You know, it's a 24/7 security operations center. So, and it's long been considered like an essential part of an effective cybersecurity strategy for an organization, you know, and it supported, you know, a SOC supports both technology and people, and it introduces the capability to identify, investigate, and resolve targeted cyber threats. That's pretty much what I would say, you know, kind of encapsulates what's happening at the level of a SOC. But we know there's people, there's, you know, a lot of technology involved, you know, there's a lot of vendors, right? And, you know, with that being said, without a doubt, that's important to understand, you know, what types of things are happening in the SOC, you know, with an expanding attack surface, like I was saying, with, you know, some of the things like, you know, with alert fatigue and cyber skills shortage. This is why I'm bringing this up, is that, you know, the big thing is you're looking at now a new era for cybersecurity. People are going now and creating their own tools and innovations behind cybersecurity initiatives that they're thinking about, like, instead of just saying, okay, well, the old model is you got to go work for somebody. You're actually specialize and you have certain tools that you can bring to the table. And that's why, I talk about this whole thing about SOC as a service. You're basically looking at yourself and saying, hey, what do I have to offer? Am I a threat hunter, or somebody who's a security analyst? What level in this particular, methodology can I see myself being able to provide a service? And that's even, it could be even consulting, compliance, regulatory. It doesn't have to be, you're looking at alerts, because we know alert fatigue is part of one of the reasons why people, look at, having that outsourced, because with the SOC, it's very much, you're having people at tier 1 and tier 2, and there's a lot of high turnover and burnout. So those things can be outsourced is what I'm saying. And because of that, you keep, you keep thinking about retention and how to keep staffing and your costs down. That's where companies are starting to look for, other ways to deliver their services, and as far as, to get cybersecurity handled by and outsourced by another entity. And with that being said, I do want to say, I don't want to get specific about different vendors, because, I think it's I want to stay vendor neutral, but I know there are a lot of different vendors out there that definitely adhere to this. And there's some that, a lot of companies use, and these are super popular. With that being said, let me go to the next one slide, which is basically depending on the type of system or organization, the SOC's processes may be governed by the compliance regulations such as HIPAA or PCI. Some of these Security Operations Center is required, to frequently audit their system to ensure compliance. And that's a big one. And when I say, again, when I talk about SOC as a service, some of these things that I'm talking about and within the SOC team, there's more opportunities for you to look at. Well, sometimes you have to spend so much money in terms of just to get compliant, and that can be, very, very complex for a startup, right? You're really just trying to get your company off the ground. That there's a lot of moving parts that you got to just keep the money flowing, with your investors and the board, and you're trying to work on other things. And so compliance and governance is really, it's not something that you think of, but you can look at that as, what if I just outsourced it, right? What if I had that as part of the offering, right? The subscription offering, for someone else to handle that. And then, not only does it protect the sensitive data, that you have, but they can also, shield you from liability and reputation harm, right? Because if you're a small startup, that's one of the biggest things, right? You get hacked before you can even get to go public, or just brand reputation damage, right? So from a legal standpoint, at least you have that sort of like taken care of, and you can work on building your company and growing the team, and making sure that you can have that roadmap and of success. Obviously, too, implementing and managing your security tools with a SOC team, you rely on a suite of technology products that help you manage and protect your organization's security environment. You have all these things, right? With SOC as a service, you don't have to worry about that, right? Those are all done, and you can just basically run your company, thinking about how best can we, move forward without, some of these other things that you might have to, spend a lot of time, that your team is going to be, bogged down in a lot of these roadblocks. Because building a good staff, there's a lot of things happening, and like I said, again, you got to look at alert fatigue and alert ranking and management. And then in a SOC, you have to juggle a variety of emerging threats at any given time. So if you think about it, you might have people who are specialized in one area, but not another. You're going to spend so much time trying to hire for people that you might not have, that they're very specialized in one area and not in another. And so keeping, that and constantly worrying about it, it could be something that keeps you up at night, and say as a CEO, right? So you want to try to think about how can we be more efficient, and how can we streamline some of these processes. But my main thing is, looking at companies nowadays, they're now starting to look at that stuff, and retention is a big one, right? But the one I want to point out is alert ranking and management. how do you, you know, how does a SOC may juggle a variety of emerging threats at any given time? That's one of our biggest concerns, like, you know, at our company, is that how do we know what's a false positive, right? Do we have the time and wherewithal to sit down and look at everything? Sometimes some of that stuff can be outsourced. I'm not saying every aspect of the SOC can be outsourced, but you can look at some of the, like the data loss prevention, right? Space, especially if you're trying to be, you're looking at compliance and governance, especially when we're looking at companies and sensitive data and data governance, that's a huge one. So if you have companies that, you know, something that can take that away off your plate, and a company is growing, you know, you're trying to staff up, right? So having a SOC can be difficult too, because to tell you the truth, most of the times, you know, when you look at a job description and it says, hey, I need this person, they've got to know like 40 or 50 different technologies. And you're like, oh, come on, really? You know, it's like, this is written from an HR perspective, not a hiring manager perspective, which is some of the reasons why I say, you know, it could be good to get, you know, someone that is knowledgeable about some of these things, but you're probably not going to me, gonna hit everything that you want to get in looking for a candidate. You might get close to some of it, but other than that, you know, that's the main thing. What services does a SOC perform? Well, gauging your available IT resources, you know, that's a big one. You know, because even where I'm at right now, you know, it's lean. Every company's thinking about how can we, you know, cut down costs, and if we're scaling, how can, you know, what other things can we reduce to, you know, to maintain, you know, our infrastructure to keep it safe and secure. But in order to protect your various devices, processes, and applications, a SOC must gain total advantage over your organization's environmental threat landscape. And that's the big thing, right? To accomplish this, they must review various server systems, networks, and applications that stores processes. Honestly, I've had that experience working in IT. These things, it's hard, right? Because you've got to have a person that's dedicated to that. Again, that's why I'm saying SOC as a service is starting to look really good for companies, because, you know, they're starting to think of, you know, where we can offset some of these things, because IT is already busy keeping up, you know, with the daily, you know, keeping access and making sure that they keep the house, you know, lights on, so to speak, and keeping things up and running. But it's also about, you know, looking at your disaster recovery plan, some of that other stuff. You can kind of look at some of these things to be outsourced, and that's the bigger part. I think as companies grow too, and they use a lot of these cloud-based SaaS applications, it starts to become more apparent to me. You know, it's easier, you know, to run your company and think about, okay, it's outsourced. We hope that, you know, nothing would happen, but, you know, most of the time we're already, you know, kind of overwhelmed with just the day to day. So that's kind of like why I touched on some of the things that I did. Also, cost savings. One of the first reasons why an organization will work with the SOC is that it lowers the total cost of ownership. And when you partnership with a SOC, you don't have to spend money hiring internal security analysts and purchasing software, or wasting valuable time, or make sure the security environment and solutions are working as intended. So that's some of the advantages: access to advanced technology, skilled and experienced professionals. You know, and it simplifies the IT relationship, you know, because I think a lot of things where I've noticed in companies, sometimes you'll see a situation where they'll think of it as, okay, we have a security team, but then we have IT, and then IT and security, you know, have their own version of what is security, you know. And some of the things that fall in the line of, say you have, you know, an agent running on each person's machine, and then, you know, that person, you know, says, hey, something's happening, and, you know, security reaches out and you have to verify, or say there's a brute force attack or something like that, you have to verify it. And if you're in a position where you're already dealing with so much, it's already on your plate, and you don't have someone in security say that can say, hey, you know, that's a false positive or whatever, you're just wasting time. And I think that some of the things I'm seeing too, and even in my role, I'm seeing, like, you know, again, false positives, alert fatigue. So you're chasing down a lot of things and then you find out, oh, it was just because, you know, there's a lot of different things happening, and it couldn't even be related to the issue at hand. The root cause could be something completely different. Also, I think with the access to advanced technologies part for SOC as a service, there's a lot of obvious offerings that your company, you may not have the ability to, with the cost and overhead of maintaining a specific tool. And, if you think about it, if you have that as a subscription based, you could customize it and say, hey, I only need to know certain, these things that I want protected. But if you have an overall advantage in the sense of like you can scale it down or scale it up, it's elastic, right? And the subscription based models depend on what your SLAs are, if you have P0s, all that can be determined. But you have an opportunity like that to grow and your company based upon some of that stuff that I talked about. You can grow it and customize it. Also, a high cost of complexities and in-house cybersecurity operations, too much noise, and an increasing complex cybersecurity landscape is creating problems for businesses of every size. Severe alert and regulation fatigue, vendor overload, and complex compliance issues. With the growing skills gap, when I talk about that, that's where I'm saying, as you're looking at it from a cybersecurity professional, what particular skill set do I have where I can offer it as a service? And this is kind of where I'm coming up with my own, looking at my career. I'm like, I'm doing a lot of different things to assess what's it going to look like in 5 or 10 years, with the growing landscape of cybersecurity, because it's only going to get more complicated, as we know. And that's why I think that the future is going to be somewhat like, this whole thing with SOC as a service, because, as we're growing as the IoT landscape, you're thinking about all these billions of people with mobile devices. It's going to get more and more complex, especially when we're looking at people working from home. And what's your home environment? Is it secure? So that's why I think if you have someone else in a SOC situation where you can outsource that, they can monitor your environment in real time 24/7. It's harder for me to think about, okay, I'm going to hire 20 people. There's all these various people in different aspects that are going to, monitor the environment and have it's like a real-time assessment of my environment. People got to go on vacation, right? People are gonna maybe make mistakes, but if you look at it from a larger standpoint, there's more room for mistakes when people get tired, right? And then that's why we have the burnout and the high turnover, which I think is when you look at the subscription-based model, they'll spread it out amongst their team, right? They can hire people who are, in different regions of the world where it'll become much more staggered, where it's not just one thing that you can have and say, in a particular region, but it's spread out all over the world. So that's another aspect that I think is an advantage. And the biggest thing about SOC as a service is, these things are obvious, right? Prevents intrusion, detects and monitors cyber threats. It contains, these are the things that, you can look at that are the benefits and the potential business, prioritize remediation based on potential business impacts. A lot of the companies that are 24/7, 365, right, that I'm talking about, the Fortune top 500 companies, the big players in Silicon Valley, think about it. They have no downtime. There is no, scheduled maintenance. It's constant go, go, go. So with the SOC as a service model, you can have a staff subscription so that, your staff is there. The coverage is there. It's customizable. It's based on the SLAs of each company, whatever, however you think about it, is based to prioritize remediation based on potential business impacts, which is a huge one, which I think, comes down to how you want to look at your subscription model with the, the whole thing. But, the size of the organization benefits, from SOC as a service, it's really going to come down to the money, it's subscription-based model. And a lot of companies don't have the budgets. The small startups, the smaller ones don't have it. So they like to think about it. Oh, it's a subscription base. Sure. It's kind of, it makes sense to me for you to get in where you can and at least have some way to protect your company and your infrastructure versus you got to compete with the bigger companies, right? And get completely inundated with the cost that it takes, because a lot of the bigger players, they obviously want to have longer, subscription models or something like that for their services. And you don't even know if some of these tools work, and I think that's the big thing. But I think the first stage starts with an assessment, getting somebody to come in and then saying, hey, what is your environment like? What do we need to, look at, and what are your crown jewels and things like that, so that you can kind of start from the beginning, and then you can scale up. But with the SOC as a service, see how you can customize it. It's scalable, but it's also, micro and small businesses, because there's a lot of startups, especially in Silicon Valley. I mean, every other day I'm looking at, there's a new company. And so I think the bigger part is, if you don't have an in-house, security, model to say, hey, or you don't even have a budget for it, you can at least come up with some of that stuff from the beginning and say, hey, okay, at least we got security, in some degree, but it may not be what we want. But until we can get to that point, we can adjust, we can keep some things in mind when it comes to that security mindset. But another thing is handing off the security responsibility to the team of security specialists. That's the big benefit of it, right? And it's also, when I talked about the benefits are going to be around retention. Again, with the cybersecurity skills shortage, it means that your organization struggle to attract and retain skilled security personnel. And I'll touch on that in a different sense of, think about it. The people who are, highly sought out in this field, they're going to the highest bidder. That's just how it works, right? I get even, some people asking me, hey, how is it that this person, gets this job and that job? And I'm like, because they're highly skilled in a specific area. And that's because, they've been working in that industry for so long, and everyone knows as your reputation grows in this industry, you become super popular, and then companies look you up and you don't have to worry about looking for work. Work's looking for you. So, but the bigger thing is, when I talk about SOC as a service, it's kind of like that. You kind of build your own reputation as a security professional. And with that being said, that's kind of the reason why it's hard for the skills shortage, because there's a lot of the really highly qualified folks are already working, or they're either being highly sought out, and they usually get a lot more money if they go with a top Fortune 500 company. We just know that's just the name, the nature of the game, the name of the game. But improves, I think it improves your security staffing, because if you can pay people well, they'll stay around. SOC as a service also, it adds on, you get security expertise, and you get it around the clock, and you also get a dedicated, person that can actually work with you, and you have a point of contact. And, sometimes you get people who are specialized in certain areas, like malware analysts or incident responders or something like that. Also, lowers the total cost of ownership of deploying, maintaining, and operating a complete SOC in-house can be expensive. And as you know, that's some of the reasons why I think, a lot of times it's the high turnover, or if there's a vulnerability or a breach, it's because people, they can't keep, the retention is hard, and alert fatigue, and they're working in the SOC, and they don't realize, how much staffing it takes. And then, once you start building a SOC, you're like, oh, this is hard to keep coverage. People are out, they're sick, they're on leave, whatever, right? And then you look at, maybe this might be something that might be ideal for us to outsource this, so that, we can at least, think about the things, like I said, staffing up, and you're growing your company. Build up the solution and institutional knowledge for a mature cybersecurity program is an extended process. It's an ongoing thing. So increase security maturity, and keep up to date with security and the latest tools, the SOC tools. So that's another benefit of SOC as a service. But the other thing that I want to touch on here, coming up on the end of this talk, is the challenges of SOC as a service. There's many, benefits, but outsourcing security is not always a simple task. Some challenges that organizations opt for managing SOC as a service commonly encounter, onboarding process is not as good as, it's time consuming, and people, with that fact that, you leave yourself open to organizational vulnerability, to cybersecurity threats during the transition. So, like, again, if someone leaves the organization and they're a specific, person that's highly specialized in a certain role, you'll lose that person, also enterprise data security, that's a big thing, right? Data governance, data security, it's always been kind of with personal information, how do you deal with that? And especially if you got companies that are in various territories, there's various governance and compliance, like where is the data at, right? If you're a company that is in the United States, is your data in Asia and is it in Europe? And so there's a lot of that stuff that you got to kind of be aware of. And then the cost of like keeping logs and things like that, that can be, a costly thing. And then, looking at, how much money you're going to spend on just, because think about log retention, keeping your logs around for say governance and compliance reasons, who's going to store that? So that could be another issue. And then, the regulatory landscape is what we see now is growing more complex. And so, you have to put up safeguards for things like that, and think about, how you may look at the regulatory aspect of it. So, if you're looking from a third party, it's like, what is their security posture like? Are they compliant? Are they certified and things like that to deal with some of these issues? So some of these things may not be covered. So you may not cover all your bases. So, my thing is to talk about kind of like the future, I think, is security, SOC as a service, because I think in-house, it's going to become we're a remote workforce right now. So I think it's going to become more and more common for you to have people spread out all over the world, and you're going to have, outsourcing this service. And, there are a lot of companies actually that are doing this. And if you really think about it, most of the companies that we use are doing this anyway. They're just not broadcasting and saying, hey, this is kind of how we look at it. But it is an added on subscription based model too, with some of these very like container based, like Kubernetes type, and that kind of thing. And what I'm saying is that's kind of going to be the future, especially with the SaaS applications, right? They have their own SOC. It's not in one place. It's very much distributed equally throughout the globe because their products are all over the world. So they have to have kind of like SOC as a service, as an offering that you pay for on top of, already their product offering. So that's pretty much all my talk is going to cover. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that awesome talk, Kevin. Do you see this model apply to big corps, or this is simply small and medium-sized business?
That's something that I've thought about when I started doing my research on kind of like a lot of companies are already doing this. If you think about it, AWS. Look at Cloudflare. It's literally, it's not just SOC as a service, but it's security as a service. But there are other products baked on. That's why I wanted to stay vendor neutral. But if you think about it, most of the open DNS, all those companies have some kind of subscription based, but it's all around, like AT&T even has it, SOC as a service. So I think this is becoming more of a something where, like, if you're a small, medium enterprise business, but if you're at a large Fortune 500, they're probably already using these, because they're not going to have to worry about, okay, we got to have a staff in-house, because now we are actually going to return to office. Is it actually going to happen in the next couple of years? Maybe, maybe not, but people have gotten used to working remote. And I think now, with the fact that we know it can work, people are going to start to say, well, why do we even need the overhead of a building and an office, and keeping, people to have, these times when we can just have them working remotely from what region of the world we want, and we can pay them based on that region's cost of living. So think about it. If you got somebody maybe in another part of the world where they are happy to take, the salary that you would have somebody take and say Texas, versus where they live, they would happily, gladly do it. And I think that's where I'm starting to see the transition going, because I think that it's just a matter of talent, because there are people who are, who have that the skills that most companies are looking for, but they may not live in the US and they may be around the world. So now I think with the SOC as a service, it's really going to come down to that particular thing about, you know, the bigger companies are looking at it like as a cost saving, right? And where can I find somebody who's, you know, got the skills that we're looking for? But, you know, they're looking outside the US. I mean, let's just be honest, the cost of living, you know, in the Bay Area, you could probably get, you know, for one person's salary, how many people could you employ with that in another place in the world? So I think the bigger companies are already using it, but they're not saying, okay, you know, here's specifically, because I think with all the tools, I think that the fact is, you know, what I'm seeing in the companies that have experience working in, they all use some sort of outside, you know, type of solution for phishing, right? For the antivirus. So I think all those things are sort of like SOC as a service, but it's not initially looked at as, oh, well, this security operations center, this whole, you know, this whole thing is all about, you know, looking at it holistically from the organization standpoint. But they're using a lot of the solutions and all these various, you know, offerings are cloud-based, and there's somewhere a place where people reside that are monitoring all these different applications, right? And they're seeing, hey, there's something happening, just like, you know, like Google Workspace. Like, how does that work, right? They have their own SOC, right? But is it in one physical building, or is it spread out and distributed throughout the world? So, I mean, I think that's the future, but you know, I'm seeing that. I don't know if anybody else here is seeing that, but that's what I'm seeing.
No, can the MSPs take care of this, or do you see the MSP simply as organizations sending, like they have probably one guy that's looking at an automated service, a cron job that sends email saying, hey, you got this? Or are they truly taking care of it? Are they truly a SOC?
I think that they're probably, it's hybrid. I think it, you know, it comes down to cost. I think with the subscription model, I think, you know, you have to look at it like AWS, right? You pay for that premium, you're going to get that, you know, what's their SLA, right? That P0. But it's all coming down to me, how you look at the bigger picture. Companies want 24/7 network monitoring and surveillance, real-time alerts and attack, you know, visualization. So they're looking at it from, you know, how easy is it for us to, you know, detect these threats and in real time remediate against it. And if you could outsource that, I think that to me speaks volumes, because you're gonna have ability to not just have, you know, be reactionary, but proactive. And I think the SOC as a service, they're gonna have a heads up on that. They're gonna see that they can offer it, and they're gonna guarantee an SLA, or they're gonna, you know, you're gonna lose that customer. But my point is, they probably have deeper insight into an organization's network in order to identify and respond to potential threats. That's just what I would feel like, you know, because think about it like Cloudflare, like how are they able to remediate and work their magic, right? As we know, they have a lot of customers, but you know, that again goes down to defense in depth. I think you're gonna look at probably what the SOC as a service provider, you know, what they're offering is based upon their subscription, you know, because it's all going to be layered on some of these tools that we're talking about, and what they can, you know, promise based on their SLA, and you know. But I think the higher the cost, obviously, you're going to I think it's going to fall down, you know, the cost is going to fall down on how much you think you can afford, you know. That's what I think.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
I was just gonna add to what Rod was saying or was asking. So the way I see it sometimes, because for example, I work in a MDR you know, team, right? So managed detection and response, right? And you know, we technically are not considered a SOC as a service, and here's the reason why. and then we're not considered MSSP, obviously, because I work for a security company. But there are some companies that has, they go through MSSPs, and all they do is, they basically, they're the middleman between, making sure that everything's up and running. They sell you hardware, software, and stuff like that, but sometimes they don't do the actual work. Where a SOC as a service and a MDR, that's what they do. MDR obviously is just more for detection and response. Where SOC, it's basically the whole 9 yards. You're talking compliance, you're talking alert monitoring, you're talking triage, you're talking incident response, you're talking, the whole thing. And so that's why, sometimes MSSPs are, in my opinion, and again, everybody kind of has their own definition of what an MSSP is and a SOC as a service is and what is MDR. But, basically in reality is that, at least from what I've seen, MSSPs are kind of limited. Companies tend to buy SOC as a service or MDR solutions more than actual, an MSSP contract type of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think you're right. It's, you can also, I don't want to lean too hard on one or the other. I think it depends on the needs of the business. And also I look at it from a budgetary aspect, right? Because we're talking about, maybe it is, wiser, at this point in the company to outsource it based upon, their how they're performing, right? Do they have the budget to hire a full-time staff to monitor? But again, I'm looking at it as we grow, and everything is, we're looking at the landscape. Threats, are becoming more and more. It's common that we need to staff up, right? Well, the cybersecurity skills gap that we're talking about, some of that is inherent in the fact that, we're human beings and we do get tired. And as that is a point, I'm saying too, look at some of these subscription based, it could be a hybrid. You could have some people on site that maybe do some things that you want to have in real time, you want to have a person, but then you also might want to do some of it and customize it. And I think I've looked at enough of these offerings and like you were saying, it just depends on the needs of the business and the budget and what they're looking to protect, right? Because some things you're right with the compliance and governance and the data governance, that's sticky. That's a very sensitive subject, because you want to make sure that you're, and then the log delivery and all the retention of the data and or from a compliance standpoint, some of this stuff is regionally distributed all over the world. So you got to think about, where is your SOC? Where do your people, reside? What country? All those different things do make a big impact on kind of like what you're looking to do in terms of regulatory and compliance, from a regulatory and compliance aspect. But you're right. It's kind of like, I think what's interesting is that most companies have this kind of hybrid model, but they won't really let it be publicly known, because they know that they want to make sure that people are aware, hey, we got some kind of robust SOC, but it's not the traditional SOC. I think it's a hybrid. You got some things that you would have in-house and some things you'd outsource, and between the two, hopefully it's defense in depth, right? You're hoping to see that you have the 24/7 coverage that you need 365 days a year, and you have someone on a minute's notice that they can notify you and be proactive and look at that threat and say, hey, you know what, this is what's happening, and this is not a false positive. If there's something, DDoS attack or something that's happening, and even outages, I'm starting to notice like misconfigurations are bigger. So if you can catch that kind of thing, I think, and be proactive, I think, it just depends on the needs of the business. But that's just from what I'm seeing, and it's different from each organization to each organization.
Any other questions?
I have one question, Kevin.
Okay.
So how does on-prem versus on cloud, come into the picture here for SOC as a service?
I think without a doubt, I think if you have an on-prem infrastructure, you need an in-house SOC, because you're going to have someone there with the IT team to determine kind of what's happening in real time. And being more of a SaaS, like a cloud-based company, there's nothing to protect in-house, right? Like as far as like actual servers that are set up in a data center, right? I think that you probably want to look at outsourcing some of that, because if you think about it, SaaS applications, Slack, Google Workspace, all those have their security already inherent on top of what you already, what your product and what's being offered in the product itself. But you have to think about it, if you want to manage somebody to manage your infrastructure on-prem, you probably, I would say, go with, someone that's an in-house provider, because like have a team of people dedicated to looking at, your environment and knowing what your environment's doing. Because I think it could be a hybrid model, but I feel like, it just makes more sense to me, because I've had both. And we never outsourced anything, because it was like, we got this data center, because that's one thing in itself, right? You got the data center, and then you have you have your own in-house team that knows, your tech stack. And then if you outsource that, if they don't really understand, especially a lot of this, when you're looking at proprietary intellectual property, like things that are, if you have a leak or something or something like that, in that sense of the code or something like that, it just damages, not only, before say the product launches, it's just, irrecoverable damage. So it's more in my mind to have, we had an in-house, we were the dedicated SOC as a service, as so to speak. But, I think they intermarry it too, kind of like as a hybrid thing with the IT department. So you're kind of part of it. But I think that's how I would see the difference. But I think you bring up a good point. I think with smaller companies too, to be honest, this just makes sense, right? Because it's small. You're a small, say you're a mom and pop shop, and you just have a website that you just have things that you just want to know. Hey, is it okay that we're up and running 24/7? What can you offer me? They don't have a lot of like a huge amount. They got personal data, things of the customers. So there's a lot at stake, but it's a big difference between that and say a Fortune 500 company like a bank. Like it just doesn't make sense to try to go all SOC as a service, especially with a bank. And that's where your on-prem legacy situation to me. I've got some friends that work in a bank, and they told me they're still using like some pretty legacy systems, and that's why they need an in-house security. They need in-house IT,
Right.
because some of the systems run on older infrastructure. But I think the companies that are emerging now, what I'm seeing, like the startups, they're all SaaS-based cloud applications, Slack, Google Workspace, and using a lot of these to their advantage. So there really is not much more than just, as long as someone doesn't really, if they don't have a vulnerability in one of those applications, they're kind of okay. But I mean, there's still best practices and things like that, that they need to follow with training up their employees and things like that.
Okay. All right. Yeah, makes sense. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, and also I just want to add to what Kevin just mentioned. So this is really true. Obviously, not all companies will require a MSSP, MDR, or SOC as a service. Merely the companies that have like traditional networks and stuff like that, who will require someone on-prem, and and even if they're moving to the cloud, not everything's going to be in the cloud, because there's a lot of things that are still going to be on-prem. But startups, for example, they now there's a new thing, and everybody heard about it, called zero trust, right? So which is basically what pretty much all the companies like Kevin mentioned, Slack and Salesforce and all those, are implementing. So the requirement to have, an actual SOC might not be it, but maybe all you need is account management. Maybe that's where they need the, to focus on, or that's where they need to do some type of monitoring. But other than that, it will not require it, but it really depends on the size of the company for sure.
Yeah, my main reason for bringing this talk also is to talk about the, the thing about the future, right? We want to see what's it going to look like 5-10 years from now. Are we going to have in-house, like an actual SOC or NOC and all that? Because you think about it, if it's all cloud-based and it's all, in the so-called, in this environment where we have all these IoT devices, even if you have a SOC and hire folks that are specialized in various degrees of knowledge of cybersecurity, there's so many devices out there now, and people are bringing that into your environment, and you kind of have to think about it. Are you going to have a person that specializes in each of those different various types of IoT devices? And then you start getting into how would you even look at the threats and even keeping up with that stuff. So it's going to get overwhelming. And I think there's going to be a lot of noise. And I think it depends on the organization's needs. But I think if you're a small startup, you're focused on the product, getting it to launch, or you're focused on something to get you, to IPO or wherever you need to be, and to be successful, right? But if you're worried about your constant day and night staying up, thinking about security, cybersecurity is always on everyone's mind. And it definitely, when I say that, on everybody's mind in the bigger picture, when it comes to, brand reputation, and there's things that, you could kind of offset. And I'm not saying all of it can be a hybrid model, but it definitely, there's something to explore, and also for opportunities for people. When you think about it, I know a company right now, and that's what they do software as a service, and they do, infrastructure as a service. And guess what? They do SOC as a service. They do it all. They have an in-house, literally, for anything you need. If you need engineers to come in and help you build your product, they got that. They got infra. So it's not uncommon. It's just, I think in the way that we're moving with the digital, with this digital world that we live in, you're looking at a large segment that's going to be, an opportunity for people to advance their careers and think about, working with this kind of mindset. And this, and my thing is, the future is going to be a remote workforce, and you can work from anywhere, with the, the thought about satellites being up in places that, and you're going to have connections in remote areas in regions of the world that you never had. You literally can have that. But you're right. If you're a small business and you're on-prem, your mom and pop shop, it might be a subscription-based model that it doesn't make sense for you to go in and say, hey, I need this, particular solution that might not be ideal based upon, the needs of the business. And it doesn't, let's just be honest, these things are costly. And as you start to look at, building your, growing your business, you can't afford, all these different types of tools. So sometimes you have to think about, hey, it would be great to have some things offered. At least I got some kind of SLA. At least I have some sort of, way that I can get into looking at cybersecurity, instead of being like, hey, I got to go all in and it costs me so much, but at the end of the day, we all need security, and I think it's important, but it also creates opportunities for people to be innovative. And I think that's what I'm really getting at. Is like, if you're a threat hunter, maybe you can offer your service, and you could say, hey, I might not be a whole total SOC, but I can have someone else who, does some other aspect of cybersecurity, and we can all go in together. Somebody's good in regulatory compliance. And then that is basically, you offer that. And that's kind of like what most companies I'm starting to see are doing. There's like a couple of people who are specialized in certain areas. And it could just be, you go in and assess it, and then do what you have to do, your due diligence to figure out, maybe we can offer this as a service based upon this SLA. And then it could be something that you could, build your own brand based on that. So that was the reason why, one of the things that I thought was interesting. I saw a lot of companies, by the way, if you research, and you will find a ton. Even AT&T, I was kind of surprised they offer it. I was like, that's ingenious, because people you know, small businesses, who wouldn't want something, and you know, at least to say, hey, you know, AT&T, I love it. You know, you got your cable, then you go and you get your SOC as a service. You got, you know, you got everything bundled into one, is what I'm saying. So that's kind of what my thoughts are on this. So that's why I wanted to present today. But I appreciate everybody for taking the time to spend listening to me today. And if you have any other questions, let me know.
Thanks again, Kevin. That was a great presentation. If there are no any other questions, then I will see you guys. We will see you guys next week. Remember, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. at Maker Nexus in Santa Clara, and bring your laptop. We'll have Wi-Fi. Probably order some pizza and some food. There will be an event around if you want to get to know the venue. The venue is huge, by the way. And this is the place where we're likely to do our in-person meetings for the near future, as we try to go back to the library, and the library is still not allowing large group meetings. So hopefully I will see a lot of you next week. Join us in Discord. That's where we communicate 24/7. And thanks again for joining us today.
All right, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Same as Rod. Hope to see you guys next week. And yeah, be safe. And you know, if we don't see you anymore, happy holidays. Have a good rest of the year. And we'll hit hard when 2022 comes on. So I'll see you guys later.